So we're going to continue our discussion on the parables. Today we're going to be in Luke chapter 12, verses 13 through 21. But the discussion, in order to talk about Luke 13 through 21, needs to include all of the remaining part of Luke chapter 12, because this is the parable, those 7 verses. But fortunately for us, Christ answers it twice. Once directly to the apostles, and then once to the person who actually asks the question that starts the parable. And then we're going to discuss how, when, where, why that affects us. Would it surprise you if I said not every parallel translates directly into your life? Some of them aren't meant for you. And this is one of those, depending upon where you are in your walk with Christ. There are times in people's lives where this parable specifically cannot apply to them. And we'll discuss that. Hey, what are you waving that can around for, man? Watch that guy. All right, so we'll start with reading Luke chapter 13. Luke chapter 12, verses 13 through 21. The parable of the rich fool. Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Jesus replied, "Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you?" Then he said, "Watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. A man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions." And then he told them this parable. The ground of a certain rich man produced a good crop. He thought to himself, "What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops." Then he said, "This is what I will do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of good things laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry." But God said to him, "You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with anyone who stores up things for himself, but is not rich toward God." So firstly, how's that parable normally delivered to you in a sermon? We'll do this. How about that? There's the words. So normally I hear this preached in a way that tells people they need to give more, and then it's almost always followed by communion and the Lord's Supper, right? And it can partially apply to that. There is an aspect of this that overlaps with how we see ourselves and how we treat things in our relationship with God. But my first question to you is, did he answer the question asked? He said, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Did he even answer the question?
Indirectly.
Where? I'll go with indirectly.
So by asking the teacher by asking Jesus to tell his brother to split the inheritance with him, he was telling Jesus, in effect, that his brother's wealth was more important to him than his brother actually was. And by telling the parable, Jesus is saying, all these material goods really aren't going to do you any good. It's the relationships in your life that matter. First off, the relationship that you've got with God. Second, with your family. Third, with everybody else.
Okay, that's the lesson you've normally been given about that. I don't disagree in whole, but I agree that's how you will normally hear these verses delivered to you. So does the person in the parable covet another's goods or his own? Can you covet your own stuff? Probably what most people do. That's how they do it, right? The ye old dragon hoard. Look at me, I'm going to lay atop my pile of gold and no one can have any, even though I, as a dragon, can't even spend it. Okay. I would offer that he has not yet answered the question. But he will. He's leading into that. And that's why you have to look at the entirety of the rest of Luke when we talk about this. The very next set of verses, 22 through 34. And he said unto his disciples, Therefore I say unto you, take no thought for your life, what ye shall eat, neither for the body, what ye shall put on. The life is more than meat, and the body is more than raiment. Consider the ravens, for they neither sow nor reap, which neither have storehouse nor barn, nor God feedeth them. How much more are ye better than the fowls? And which of you, with taking thought, can add to his stature 1 cubit? If ye then be not able to do that thing which is least, why take ye thought for the rest? Consider the lilies, how they grow. They toil not, they spin not, and yet I say unto you, that Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of those. If then God so clothe the grass, which is today in the field, and tomorrow is cast into the oven, how much more will he clothe you, O ye of little faith? And seek not ye what ye shall eat, and what ye shall drink, neither be ye of doubtful mind. For all these things do the nations of the world seek after, and your Father knoweth that ye have need of these things. But seek ye the kingdom of God, and all these things shall be added unto you. Fear not, little flock, for it is for your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Sell that ye have, and give alms. Provide yourselves bags which wax not old, a treasure in the heavens that faileth not, where no thief approacheth, neither moth corrupteth. For where your treasure is, there will be your heart also. And I will not read from the King James again this morning. I shouldn't have read from there in the first place. That's just where I put my finger. It's too difficult to translate 16th century English into 21st century actions. So part of his answer he directly gives to the disciples immediately after. This is only part of it. Okay? Who are the parables mostly for? They're for the disciples. He gives them to large crowds of people. He gives them to everybody. What is the first thing he tells to the disciples when they ask about parables? He says, don't worry, most of these people aren't going to get it. I'm saying that to them so that I can say this to you, so that you ask the questions and I give the answers, because they're the purpose. And this is part of that teaching for them about that. Specifically, what did he just tell them as a group? They're the little flock. Is there another believer out there in the crowd? No. They're followers, they're not believers. There's a difference. And so when Jesus speaks to the crowd, they're not what you and I would consider Christians. They're not us. They're not disciples yet. And we're going to get to that definition of term here very shortly. So what does he tell this group of individuals who he's been charged from God to keep so that they can go out and complete the work that he's going to initiate? What does he tell them it means? What does he do to the disciples twice in regards to learning how to be the ministry? He sends them out. Both times, what does he send them with?
Clothes on their back.
A flat nothing, right? Because that's their purpose in life. Their lives are dedicated to spreading the word in the first generation available. And what does that mean for them? What does Jesus continuously tell them about what their lives will be like? They have to unhook from everything we know of in regards to possessions, materials, and homes and things like that, and they have to beat feet on the road. That is their future. And then because they're the example for us to follow after Christ, most of them will be sacrificed like Christ. So we have that continuity of faith in action. And so when he gives this disciple, or when he gives this parable, and he turns around, he is interpreting it to the disciples for the disciples. Okay? Very specifically there. Not for anyone else. He's not saying, don't think for a minute he's suggesting to anyone else in that crowd to give up. And he hasn't even yet given the answer back to this dude who asked the question. But he's starting to get there. And the answer comes in the next part. Watchfulness. He's still talking to the disciples. Okay? And then he's going to make a hard turn back to the people. And this is where you know he's predicting their future for them. He says, be dressed ready for service. And this is from the NIV. We're going to a version I can read. Be dressed, ready for service, and keep your lamps burning, like men waiting for their master to return from a wedding banquet, so that when he comes and knocks, they can immediately open the door for him. It will be good for those servants whose master finds them watching when he comes. I tell you the truth, he will dress himself to serve, will have them recline at the table, and will come and wait on them. It will be good for those servants whose master finds them ready, even if he comes in the second and third watch of the night. But understand this, if the owner of the house had known at what hour the thief was coming, he would not have let his house be broken into. You also must be ready, because the Son of Man will come at an hour when you do not expect him. Peter asked, Lord, are you telling this parable to us or to everyone? And this is his answer. The Lord answered, who then is the faithful and wise manager whom the master puts in charge of his servants to give them their food allowance at the proper time? It will be good for that servant whom the master finds doing so when he returns. I tell you the truth, he will put him in charge of all his possessions. But suppose the servant says to himself, my master is taking a long time in coming. And then he begins to beat the men servants and maid servants and to eat and drink and get drunk. The master of that service will come on a day when he does not expect him and at an hour he is not aware of. He will cut him to pieces and assign him a place with the unbelievers. That servant who knows his master's will and does not get ready or does not do what his master wants will be beaten with many blows. But the one who does not know and does things deserving punishment will be beaten with few blows. From everyone who has been given much, much will be demanded. And from the one who has been entrusted with much, much more will be asked. So Peter, who am I talking to? Who are Christ's servants? Who are his delegates that are on the earth? Who is in his inner circle? This is what he is telling. He's predicting the apostles' future and their task and purpose. And I feel sorry for them that he's doing it in a little bit roundabout way, but I think I would have understand if my boss was talking to me and he says, Ray, are you a manager in my organization? Yes, sir, I am. I expect my managers to do the following things. What are you going to do? I would say back, I think I'm going to go do those things, or you're going to fire me, because he lays it out for them, right? This is your job description. These are the things I'll evaluate you by, and if you don't, it's criteria for me to fire you. What happens when Christ fires you? We have a name for that place. Huh? That's right. You really do get fired, right? So it's for them. And Christ has been very clear to that. And he says that in verses 49 through 53. For I come to bring fire on the earth, and how I wish it were already kindled. But I have a baptism to undergo, and how distressed I am until it is completed. Do you think I came to bring peace on earth? No, I tell you, but division. From now on there will be 5 in one family divided against each other, 3 against 2, and 2 against 3. They will be divided, father against son, and son against father, mother against daughter, and daughter against mother, mother-in-law against daughter-in-law, and daughter-in-law against mother-in-law. Which is no more than what happens in his own life with his physical family, right? They think he's crazy. They don't believe until he is resurrected. And so they're all their lives, they're spent in this Thomas-like position, just stuck there. I don't know if have any of us ever had a really famous relative? Being a family member to that person can be a lesson in life in and of itself. Half the family wants to treat him the same as they always did. Half wants to treat him different. Half wants something from him. The other half try to hold it against him. That he's not just intuitively knowing that you need something and giving it away because he has resources. So it's a weird dynamic. All of that's to the disciples directly. But he goes on, and now he gets back to the crowd. That's, in fact, the next words, right? Verse 54. He said to the crowd, So he's going to turn away from the disciples for a moment. I can't say physically, but I can certainly say metaphorically. And he's going to address the crowd. And now we're going to get at the question asked. Go ahead, Fred.
Is it on? Just a couple things, and I don't know whether I'm going to distract or not. But yes, he was speaking to
Somebody said use your big boy voice. I didn't say that.
Well, I guess I keep thinking, yes, he's speaking directly to his apostles. He's instructing them, and yet he knew what was coming. He knew the Holy Spirit would wind up in our hands, and he knew that we may need some instructing too, along the same line. And so I think this is to us as well as to them. And I know you.
We're going to get to that point next.
And
you're correct.
But I'm going to add a footnote. The footnote is that many, many years ago, I had a secretary who she and her husband would take forays to different parts of the world as missionaries. And I remember her saying, if you haven't used it in the past year, get rid of it. And I thought, how could I deal with that? You know, right now our house is so full of stuff that I can't let go of. And yet, isn't that what Jesus is saying to his...
Yeah, we're storage mongers, especially in America. You have too much room and too much land and too little time. And so we're all little dragons hoarding memories in boxes that we never open, but we surmise are there.
And I also wonder whether it's more difficult to do this if you're already wealthy or if you've never had anything and you begin to accumulate wealth.
We'll see. We're going to get to all those points here in just a minute. I'm going to close out verses 54 through 59, and then that is the next discussion. Okay, that's great. We know what he told the apostles. We know what he told the crowd. How do we bring that forward to us? Which parts can we pick up? Which parts can we not? And then what do we do with that? So, he said to the crowd, when you see a cloud rising in the west, immediately you say, it's going to rain. And it does. And when the south wind blows, you say, it's going to be hot. And it is. Hypocrites, you know how to interpret the appearance of the earth and the sky. How is it that you don't know how to interpret this present time? Why don't you judge for yourselves what is right? As you are going with your adversary to the magistrate, try hard to be reconciled to him on the way, or he may drag you off to the judge, and the judge turn you over to the officer, and the officer throw you into prison. I tell you, you will not get out until you have paid the last penny. That's the answer to the question asked. Tell my brother to split the inheritance with me. What is his response? He saved it till the very end because he wanted to get through this parable about life, and he wanted to talk to the disciples about theirs, and then he answers the question. First, the question asks him to be judge and arbiter of a worldly dispute, and he refuses to acknowledge the ask. That's what he's done. Who appointed me judge and arbiter for you on this matter? Because what do the Jewish people have? They have the law. This is actually addressed directly in the law. Unfortunately for that guy, he has no recourse. It goes to the older brother. He is the head of the family. He doesn't have to split it. And the older brother has moral obligations implied under the law that he's still going to keep the family intact and that some of those resources will in fact be shared out. But he's the head of the clan. He doesn't have to if he wants to be morally bankrupt and corrupt in God's eyes. So he's asking him to do me a solid, Jesus. Break the law for my good. And what is Christ's purpose toward the law? I've not come to break the law, I've come to fulfill the law. All the law points toward me, and here I am. So what does he tell him to do? You take that right into the court in which it belongs, and you eat that judgment, whatever it is. You live by it. And if you go there and they find you guilty of fraud or cheating, and they throw you in jail, essentially he says, good day to you. I say good day. That's the answer to the question asked. So Christ isn't here for you to bring him your worldly problems in arbitration and judgment against another person. That's addressed in some other letters, right? How we're supposed to work things out with a godly spirit toward reconciliation and give over. But what's the last thing anyone wants to give over in life? Money. Tell me I'm wrong. We can disagree about that. That's why he starts with that entire discourse on possessions. Because what has he got to teach the disciples to do? Some of whom are married and have obligations. How do you unhook from that? Right? Life is a huge weight. You know, if this is my life, strap a chain around it and put a snap link right there. And I'm tied to it, right? And I've got to carry that around forever. Because it's life. It's all my burdens, all my bills, all my requirements, all my obligations. Toward anyone but who? God. And what does Christ tell the disciples? You can keep those, but you need to unhook them and choose to carry them in a way that puts me first. So you better always be walking towards me. That's not a great analogy, but it's an analogy. Okay? So, Fred, how does that apply to us? Are you a disciple? You think you are. I agree. You think you are. I'm not saying you're not. Because what makes a disciple?
You follow Jesus.
Okay. Now, the only people who did on the day of this conversation were the disciples. Everyone else was a follower. There is a distinct difference. And so, if you're a disciple, if you want to model your behavior and your lifestyles and your ethical code and all of those things that make you a person after Christ and his teachings, then go ahead and claim that title with a little d, in which case you accept the burden of responsibility for all of the things Christ has said a disciple should be practicing in their life, and you should be getting after them after your kind. You are not required to replicate the life of one of the 12. Not your job. Not your job. You are free to do the best you can where you are. Okay? You don't have to walk the earth penniless, dust-covered feet, in penance of some sort to give your life to Christ, probably because you're going to resent it. That just negates the whole thing. Or because you were really, truly called to that, you're not going to do it as well as you might otherwise. Whenever Christ talks forward to us, it's always with the example of living as a disciple post-resurrection in at least a first-century Christian world. And not once does Paul or Peter or anyone else tell people, every one of you got to get up and move about aggressively in the name of the Lord. Stir the world up like an angry bee's nest. They don't say that. What do they tell the Christians to do? Be Christian. With no implication of where you're at, because it doesn't matter. Wherever you are. And you're only required to help to the extent of your reach. I don't have to invent reasons to make myself penniless and poor in the name of the Lord. But if I can see a need, I should attempt to fill a need to the best of my ability. That's what it means for us, I think, Fred, for today. In today, I should say. People come up with a lot of reasons to spend Ray Fuller's money. I don't mean that personally, but I mean each of you have felt that in your life at some point. Somebody has come and said to you, "Hey, go throw your money at this thing." Why? I want it. I don't think so. So, no, I'm not required or obligated to do that. And then what's the number one thing they say when they want your resources without obligation and without care or concern for the burden it places on you? We're family. Family helps family. Mark my words. Anytime anybody who's blood related to you comes and says that, it's coming with a bill that they aren't paying. But you will if you let them make you. Because I have a family. What did Christ say about family?
It's going to get torn apart.
All of you. Now that's easy for Ray Fuller because I don't really have a large attachment to my family anyway, my blood family. And so I was always free to adopt my Christian family, 100%. I don't have the conflicts you guys have about that.
In the text you just read, he also said your blood family is going to get torn apart.
There you go. So do we mean it when we say we're family? Or is it convenient? No, I'm not saying to abandon your children, because nothing in Scripture says that. I'm not saying to abandon your parents, because specifically Scripture does say don't do that, in the example of Corbin.
I hope I can express this the way I want to, but when Jesus was presented with the question about what to do, he had a dialogue of the things in nature, how people live, how they toil, how God is going to take care of them. And then he goes on and he closes that out with when he talks about, okay, you guys know if there's a storm coming, you know what, so you need to know and be prepared with what God wants you to be prepared for.
He's really railing at him for having common sense and no spiritual sense.
Exactly.
I am God in front of you, and you can't see me coming. But you know when it's going to rain because you're close to the earth like that. And so it's a little bit insulting to them. And he frequently tells that to people. Why do you not see what's before you? How can you be like God when you can't recognize God? So there is a little bit of that in there also. So, what are we going to do with the parable? He's going to set it aside. Sir. They're running you ragged today. Thank you. You're putting on your miles.
The text that you have on the screen there was spoken to everyone. It was spoken to the crowd. And I think we do need to pay attention to what, I mean, he says, watch out. Okay, be on your guard. This is something that greed is something that is common to mankind. It's something that I think on some level everyone struggles with in some way. We want something that's not ours, or we want to hang on to something that is ours when we don't need it. And if you look at the parable, that's really kind of what this rich man was doing. You know, he was just hanging on to it for himself, even though it was more than what he needed. And then it didn't really end up doing him any good. And I think we need to take that seriously. If God has blessed us, use the blessings that He's given us for good. And if He hasn't blessed us with a lot of wealth, with a lot of earthly possessions, accept the blessings He has given us. The wealth isn't necessarily good for us.
Right. Yeah. So greed is an umbrella term, right? It's a concept, and you can be greedy about absolutely anything. I have seen people be greedy about the days of their lives and put themselves in positions where their life itself was a painful torment that they were unwilling to let go of. And it was horrible. I agree that in America it's mostly about money, because nowhere else in the world as rapidly will money buy you comfort. Money can solve almost any problem in America. It can't make you a better person. But any other problem, it'll buy away very quickly. And that's why in America, when we say greed, we almost immediately go to coinage, right? But You can be greedy about anything that can be possessed. Okay, you can be greedy about land. You can be greedy about your emotions. You can be greedy about your love. You can be greedy about the love of others. And all of those are toxic when they go too far. So he had enough. And he got a little bit more. And what does God say about what do you do with when I give you a little bit more? He says, make it rain. Dole that out. Show me that you understand the gift of my life doled out for you. What does he do? He's like, man, I need a bigger barn to push this stuff up into so I can just look at it and go, yeah. And think of me. And so what happens? He finds out the futility of hoarding when God pronounces to him, tonight I take you. Who gets it when he's done? When that guy goes away? We don't know. The point is it's someone else. And if that's your personality, then it's probably somebody you didn't want to have it, which is just an additional burn for you. So yes, we have to be very careful with how we treat the gifts we've been entrusted with. And I've challenged people frequently, specifically when it comes to wealth in America. I challenge you, the more you give away, the more the Lord will give you. It's not an instantaneous transaction. You're not a bank teller for God. You're not going to give away $1,000 and he's going to immediately say, hey, here's $1,500. That's not how it works. But I promise you it will come in your life. And it may not be, a currency transfer one for one. Maybe learning to give away that money opens up your heart so that you can give that away to somebody and you can find happiness. Maybe giving away those material things make way in your life for other gifts. That is how God works, by the way. Absolutely how God works. And if you're afraid to do it, then it's on you, not him. Because he will only entrust you with the amount you can be entrusted with. That's specific. I mean, that's, again, what I just read, right? If he gives you a lot, he expects you to do right with it. If he doesn't, that doesn't mean you can't be trusted. That might mean that your mission is somewhere else, and you're not supposed to be the agent of giving. Maybe you're the agent of something else. I won't speculate as to what. Yes, ma'am.
Well, two things. This concept is presented intensely in Ecclesiastes, of course. The other thing I thought was kind of interesting was that this man is harvesting crops and building bigger barns, and then saying, I don't have to do anything for the rest of my life, which of course turned out to be true. But the crops don't last.
It was true, right? He didn't have to do anything the rest of his life.
It's just that the crops don't last the rest of your life, generally speaking. I mean,
But does God teach us what comes after a bumper crop? Famine.
Yeah.
He's prepping you for a reason, to take care of others. And when you turn away from that responsibility, it's not great for us, morally, mentally, emotionally, and physically. So all of that, when we think about our lives as disciples, and we're supposed to change over time, right? Change is a continuous process in our lives. I wasn't the Christian I am today the day I came out of the water. That guy is far in my past. And I don't even look back because I don't recognize him. I hope I'm a better person. I believe I'm a better person now. And I wasn't as good then in the way Christ defines it. I wasn't as righteous in God's eyes then as I am, I believe, as I am today. Because I had a lot of growth to do. That was just me coming out of the water. That was just me accepting Christ into my life and saying, okay, I want to transition some morals and values here, and I want to adopt your belief system and faith in you as opposed to whatever I've been holding on to. Then I started to do the research and the work and putting in the time and effort to learn how and who I was supposed to be. So it's a continuous process. You are granted all the days of your life, but you have to use them continuously to do it. And I think it's a fair transaction. I mean, I can't pay the price he paid. I can give my life for someone, but that's a one-on-one action. I could push Denise, I don't know, out of the way of a car and take the hit, but then I'm done, right? I don't have any one-ups. I'm not coming back. And so it's not, I can't replicate what Christ did. But I can act like that. And the way he's given that to me is in what I hope is a little bit of knowledge and a little bit of ability to share. And I don't know what your gifts are. But part of your journey is supposed to be discovery, right? And finding those and then using those. Okay. So figure that part out. But the lesson of the parable is be prepared to do the things that the Lord has you do or wants you to do with the things you've been given. Be willing to give. What would happen in the world if everybody just took care of the people right around them? I'm not talking about your blood family. If every neighborhood, and this used to be this, we have this myth in America that this is the way we used to be, right? That communities were tightly knit and everybody came together and everybody took care of each other. And if I knew it was raining, I would run down to the farm where the water ran off to, and we'd spend all night saving their livestock. And then I didn't have to worry about mine because it wasn't my turn to rain. But when my crops busted, everybody would show up, and I would get seed for next year, and they would make sure we had enough in our barn to keep us through the winter. And we have this myth of community, that we did things like that. Do you still hold it? Do you believe your neighbors would band together and do that for you now? You should be shaking your head no, because it's not what we teach. And it's not how we see our community behave, so you should have no faith in that. But we're supposed to be that community. And so if you need something, then you're supposed to know how you're supposed to know who and how to ask, and we're supposed to know how to give. That's our task. That's almost every letter, except for those personal ones, to Titus and Timothy. That is every other letter. Know how to behave as a family of Christians. Take care of each other. And if you're able, extend your reach and help me on my mission to take care of those in Jerusalem who have suffered famine. I can drop this mic right there. Those are the letters. They all have different other purposes also, but that lesson is in each of them. So it's across the spectrum of all other problems we have as Christians. Any other comments before we close this out and give you back a few minutes of your time this morning? It's tough, right? It's a challenge. So just remember, sometimes you got to look up and down in Scripture. How much farther on in that conversation did Christ answer the question? Minutes later. I bet that guy forgot he asked it because there's so much going on in the initial part of the answer to the disciples. He's like, did he even hear me? Did he answer my question? And then when he finally gets to the answer, what was his response probably? Because he just wanted somebody to solve the problem his way immediately to his solution. Converse to the law, or I should say inverse to how the law says to do it. So pick the parts that apply to you, apply them to you, and then watch God's work in your life. All right, we're complete. It's 13 minutes. I yield back 7 minutes of your life. Thank you for your time.